Let's talk about guns. Today we're talking about guns. The right to bear arms. Why is it important? Why was it given to us? Well, why do we have it? And what are some criticisms of the Second Amendment? What is the Second Amendment? What does it mean? Things like that. So let's get started. The Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Many people, primarily people on the modern political left, like to use the idea that the term well-regulated militia would imply that some sort of, state-sponsored militia would be the case, would be responsible for protecting our country. That is not what the clause means. The clause, a well-regulated militia, it's called the prefatory clause, or prefatory clause. It's a preface. It's not the right itself. So basically it is saying a well-regulated militia, basically, a well-organized group of private citizens being necessary to the security of a free state, being necessary to protect people from potential government tyranny. And then there is the other clause, which states that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is the important clause. That is the clause that actually defines your right. Cenk Uygur actually was the one who made the argument, the false argument, that well-regulated militia implies a government militia. And it doesn't take a lot of reading to understand the fact that well-regulated militia does not mean what leftists are willfully misinterpreting it to mean. Let me read some quotes from the framers of the Second Amendment. George Washington, first annual address to both houses of Congress, January 8th, 1790. A free man ought not only to be armed but disciplined. Thomas Jefferson, Virginia Constitution Draft 1, 1776. No free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. Also Thomas Jefferson, letter to James Madison, January 30th, 1787. I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. That implies, that quote, still applies today. I'd prefer, to own a machine gun than have the idea of, safety and protection from, with government agents and the NSA and the giant military-industrial complex. I'd rather protect myself and be free than have a giant-ass government. And that is what the Second Amendment is meant to protect us from. But for some dumbass reason, Americans today are becoming more and more lenient towards infringements. Okay, next quote. And this one should prove to you once and for all that all gun laws are infringements. Okay, also Thomas Jefferson in Commonplace book, he's quoting a dude named César Becquer in 1774. And this quote says, "The laws that forbid the carrying of arms are laws of such a nature, they disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants. They serve rather to encourage than to prevent homicides, for an unarmed man may be attacked with greater confidence than an armed man." Jefferson here, or rather Beccaria here, points out the perfect reason why all Americans, why all human beings, in fact, should be armed. It's easier to, it's harder to attack an armed man than it is an unarmed man. If you're unarmed, it's easier for you to be victimized. Also Thomas Jefferson, in a letter to John Cartwright in 1824. The Constitution of most of our states, as well as of the United States, assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right and duty to be armed at all times. So, don't just be armed, but be armed everywhere you go. It is your duty, he says. Because your rights don't come from government. Your rights come and are expressed by you. Benjamin Franklin, in his historical review of Pennsylvania in 1759, they that give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. If you are willing to give up part of your right to bear arms, like, say, someone like David Hogg is doing today, then you don't deserve the protection that it supposedly offers you. You don't deserve it because you'd rather give up your right to protect yourself than be allowed to be a free man. And you'd rather give up everyone else's right in the process. So you don't deserve liberty or safety. George Mason, referencing advice given to the British Parliament by Pennsylvania Governor Sir William Keith, the debates in the several state conventions on the adoption of the federal Constitution, June 14th, 1788. To disarm the people is the most effectual way to enslave them. You get rid of people's guns. That provides a very, very easy, very, very efficient way to gain a huge amount of control over them, right? I'm not just talking about the Soviet Union, which took away the people's guns and then killed millions of people. I'm not just talking about, Stalinist, I'm not just talking about, Maoist China, which did the same thing. I'm not just talking about Nazi Germany, which took the right to bear arms away from the inferior race, the Jews, the blacks, the gays, all people who were deemed inferior by the Nazis, and given not allowing them to protect themselves. I'm not just talking about the Cubans who took away the right to bear arms. I'm not just talking about the Venezuelans who took the right to bear arms away in 2012. That was only a few years ago. We should be learning from this. But I'm also talking about the UK, who banned all guns and now have, mass stabbings, huge bombings, poisons. London has just as high of a homicide rate as major cities in the United States. And they don't have any guns. What does that tell you? The gun isn't really the problem, is it? Not only that, but the United Kingdom government, the UK government is arresting people for saying what is deemed offensive on the internet. A man named Marcus Meacham, who goes by the name of Count Dankula on the internet. He's a really funny dude. He's a comedian. And anyway, he made a joke with his pug, a Nazi joke, and posted it on the internet, and he was arrested. Your Second Amendment protects your First Amendment. If you don't have the right to bear arms, you don't have the right to speak freely. Next up, Noah Webster, an examination of the leading principle of the federal Constitution, October 10th, 1787. He says, "Before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed, as they are in almost every country in Europe. The supreme power in America cannot enforce unjust laws by the sword, because the whole body of the people are armed and constitute a force superior to any band of regular troops." Unfortunately, that isn't the case today. Unfortunately, we have given up too many of our rights, and now the United States military and even local police forces are so much more powerful, and they have so many more arms and are so much larger in number than ordinary Americans. And that's not the way it should be. Because, right, in order to start the boogaloo, you gotta have superior arms. There's no other way to protect your rights, no better way to protect your rights than to have superior arms to that of your own government. That was the way the system was set up, and that was the way we need to return it to. Or that is the way. Here we are, James Madison, Congress 434, June 8th, 1789. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the best and most natural defense of a free country. That alone proves to you that Cenk Uygur's idea that a well-regulated militia has anything to do with government is completely bullshit. James Madison, literally, this is James Madison's quote. This is literally his words. I just wish that if we were to go back in time, we would tell the founders to write, composed of the body of the people as a whole trained to arms into the Second Amendment directly. Because otherwise, you have to go back and you have to read the quotations from the framers, which a lot of people are too lazy to do, or just won't do because they'd rather push a narrative than be honest about the views of the Founding Fathers and why the Second Amendment was written. Next up, this is an excellent one, from William Pitt the Younger, speech to the House of Commons, November 18th, 1783. He says, "Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves." So the idea that it is necessary to take away our right to bear arms, because it would save the children, or because it would prevent gun crime. In reality, it wouldn't. Most of them are targeting so-called assault rifles or assault weapons today. All rifles combined make up less than 5% of all total gun-related homicides, so all you're really doing in the end is virtue signaling. Plus, I already brought up the example of the UK, where they banned all guns and they still have mass homicides. So it still happens, and you're not going to stop it from happening by getting rid of people's arms. All you're going to do is eliminate their right to defend themselves. Or rather, their power to defend themselves. Okay, next up is another quote about the militia, as if you weren't already convinced. It is by Richard Henry Lee in Federal Farmer number 18 on January 25th, 1788. It says, "A militia, when properly formed, are in fact the people themselves, and include, according to the past and general usage of the states, all men capable of bearing arms. To preserve liberty is essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms, and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them." So, what do we get from this? The militia is the body of the people as a whole, and in order to, secure the free state, it's very important that the people be trained to arms from a young age. All the people. So, honestly, more people should be taught how to hold a gun, how to shoot a gun. Lots more people. Most of the people calling for common sense gun laws today don't know shit about the guns that they're calling for laws against. And in my view, we should require them to at least hold the gun, if not to shoot it, and then compare it to other guns so that they know truly what the gun is capable of, rather than pushing a narrative that it's incredibly dangerous just because of the way that it looks, or because it's been used in a few shootings. I'm not trying to say that, that shootings should be played low. Of course, these are tragic events, and it's very important that we honor the lives of those that we've lost. But at the same time, we cannot use them as an excuse to propagate political pandering and, bring forth more anti-gun laws. We can't allow them to do that. Right? Putting aside the fact alone that the majority of these people calling for gun laws are simply all they're really doing is appealing to emotion. They don't know shit about guns. So we've been through a lot of quotes so far, and most of the rest of them are exactly the same, but I found another really good one. It's by Joseph Story in his Commentaries on the Constitution of the United States in 1833. He says, "The right of the citizens to keep and bear arms has justly been considered as the palladium, something like that, of the liberties of a republic, since it offers a strong moral check against the usurpation," I don't even know how to pronounce half these words, sorry, "and arbitrary power of rulers, and will generally, even if those are successful in the first instance, enable the people to resist and triumph over them." Okay, so how are we supposed to resist and triumph over the government if the government has so many more arms than we do? It's not possible. The people need not only the right to bear arms, but the right to keep and bear any and all of the very same arms that the government has. That brings me to the very last quote that I have, and it is by, of course, Alexander Hamilton. Now, I'm not a Federalist. There's a lot I disagree with Mr. Hamilton on, primarily the size of the federal government in contrary to the size of the state and local governments. But anyway, in Federalist Papers number 29, he says, "If circumstances should at any time oblige the government to form an army of any magnitude, that army can never be formidable to the liberties of the people, while there is a large body of citizens, little if at all inferior to them in discipline and the use of arms, who stand ready to defend their own rights of those of their fellow citizens. This appears to me the only substitute that can be devised for a standing army, and the best possible security against it if it should exist." So in this quote, Hamilton is saying that if a military were to be formed, because at the time there was no military, the people were the defense of the country. If in the event that a military were to be formed, it should never surpass the people in terms of armament, because if it does, that's a recipe for tyranny, right? So we need to get back to the way it was back then. We, first of all, can and should cut our military a little bit and bring the troops home. And we should, of course, give the people their arms back.
Hell yes, we're gonna take your AR-15, your AK-47.
Welcome to the rice fields, mother.
Drop it. Yeah.
You will never get this, la 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 la.